Lana Kim had once been a name whispered backstage at fashion weeks, tagged in millions of posts, and etched into the minds of influencers and celebrities alike. A makeup artist at the top of her game, she wielded brushes like wands, turning everyday faces into ethereal masterpieces. Her calendar was booked months in advance, and her tutorials sparked viral trends across continents. Confidence wasn't something she wore, it was something she painted onto others. But success was a fragile thing. One rainy night, after wrapping a last-minute photo shoot, Lana's car was struck by a truck on a slick highway. Her life didn't flash before her eyes. Instead, there was silence followed by cold. When she opened her eyes again, it wasn't to the sterile white of a hospital, but to the dim, flickering light of a castle chamber. The air smelled of smoke and herbs, and her limbs felt foreign, heavy, restrained. She tried to sit up and gasped. This wasn't her body. She had been reincarnated into the body of Helviera Ryston, a notoriously detested noblewoman in an ancient kingdom. Once feared and ridiculed for her harsh tongue, erratic behavior, and cruel arrogance, Helvira had been the subject of gossip columns disguised as court decrees. And now, Lana was trapped in her skin. The realization hit her like ice water. Her new body was bloated, unbalanced, and aching with every breath. Her joints throbbed. Her skin was inflamed. Reflection, once a canvas she controlled, was now something that made her flinch. The maids whispered behind doors, calling her cursed. The children cried when she passed. Nobles sneered, veiling their contempt behind painted fans and polite laughter. She had lived for beauty, and now she was the punchline of its cruelest joke. The castle halls were cold, but the shame burned hotter. She tried to exercise in secret, sneaking out at dawn to avoid mocking eyes. But her muscles failed her. She collapsed more than once. Her lungs rebelled. Her limbs trembled. Every failure stung like betrayal. But Lana was no stranger to starting over. What others saw as punishment, she chose to see as a challenge. She began with what she knew: nutrition, hydration, movement. She scavenged the kitchens for fresh produce, bartered with herbalists, and taught herself the local flora. In a corner of the market, she built a small shack using scraps of wood and leftover cloth. There she began to mix scrubs and tonics from ground roots and boiled leaves, applying them to her skin and documenting the results. Slowly, the bloat receded, her gait grew steadier, her face softened. At first, the townsfolk laughed at her beauty hut. They called her delusional, but curiosity has a way of blooming in silence. Women, first one, then another, began to visit. They returned with glowing cheeks and eyes full of wonder. Word spread. The same hands that once pointed and mocked now reached out for help. Among those who watched her transformation was Kellen. A knight of few words and fewer expressions, Kellen had been assigned to watch her. The court feared Helvira's sudden shift in behaviors. Some believed it was a trick, others a possession. He expected to see madness. What he found was quiet resolve. He saw the way she flinched at every insult, yet never responded in kind. He saw her scrub her calloused hands raw, mixing ointments for others. He noticed how she never asked for praise, even when she deserved it. He began to linger, at first in the background, then closer. He brought her rare herbs from his patrols, guarded her shop during protests, and once, without a word, struck a nobleman who spat at her feet. Lana noticed him too. She noticed the way he limped after long patrols, how he clenched his fists when frightened children ran from her. She saw the scar across his palm that he tried to hide, the exhaustion behind his eyes. She didn't ask him questions. She offered warmth. Their connection wasn't forged in grand gestures, but in tiny acts of care. He once fixed a broken hinge on her door. She left a salve for his injured leg where he could find it. He waited for her in the rain. She saved the last cup of tea for him. By the time the court accused her of witchcraft, able to accept her rise in popularity, Kellen stood beside her, not because it was his duty, but because he believed in her. He defended her reputation, risked his rank, and when she was cleared, he didn't ask for anything in return. He didn't need to. When she rose to prominence as a respected healer and beauty artisan, transforming not only herself, but the definition of beauty in a rigid, cruel world, he stood with her not as a prize, but as a partner. Their love never needed grand declarations. It was built in moments, in presence, in understanding. Lana no longer needed validation through beauty. She had redefined it on her own terms, through effort, kindness, and resilience. And in doing so, she found not just a place and purpose in this foreign world, but someone who saw her completely. She was no longer Helvira the Beast. She was Lana, reborn, not just in body, but in spirit. As Lana's shop grew, so did the whispers, this time not of scorn, but fascination. They called her potions miraculous. Her hands, once considered clumsy and unladylike, became revered. People traveled from distant provinces to seek her remedies. Scars faded, inflammations vanished. Brides requested her to prepare them for their wedding day. Even the queen's cousin sent for her in secret, desperate to cure the blemishes on her face before a royal ball. But with admiration came envy. Other noblewomen, long reliant on imported powders and tinctures from neighboring kingdoms, scoffed publicly while sending their maids to spy on Lana's recipes. Some merchants tried to copy her techniques, peddling diluted versions of her work at double the price. She stayed silent. She knew the truth of her craft, and so did her clients. But the court was not so easily impressed. To the nobility, Lana's rise was threatening. She had rebranded herself, yes, but her face still bore the name Helvira. And Helvira had enemies dozens. Politicians, spurned lovers, and old friends with long memories watched her with narrowed eyes. They saw her gaining influence with the people. Worse, with the queen herself. When the invitation came, an official summons to appear at a royal assembly as an honored guest, Lana knew it was both a recognition and a trap. "You shouldn't go," Kellen said that night. His brow furrowed as he watched her mix rose water into a ceramic bowl. "They want a reason to discredit you?" "I know," she replied, not looking up. "But hiding will give them one." Kellen hesitated, then nodded. Didn't try to protect her from her choices, only supported them when she made them. That was what she loved most about him. The night of the royal assembly, Lana arrived in a dress she had sewn herself. No corsets, no jewels. It's just soft flowing fabric dyed with marigold and sage. Her face bore minimal decoration, a single line of kohl, lips stained with crushed berries, and a touch of luminance from her own balm. She didn't look like a noble. She looked radiant. Gasps echoed through the hall. Not because of grandeur, but because of defiance. She wasn't what they expected. She never had been. The queen, regal and sharp-eyed, watched her approach with unreadable expression. Then slowly she smiled. "You've caused quite a stir," she said, her voice low and laced with amusement. "Some say you're a fraud. Others say you're a genius." "I'm neither, Your Majesty," Lana replied with a calm bow. "I just stopped believing that beauty belonged to a chosen few." There was a silence, then applause. Hesitant at first, then louder and louder. That night marked a turning point. The court could no longer ignore her, but they could only try to contain her. But Lana had grown too big for their cages. She began to teach others, not just how to make masks and oils, but how to find power in their appearance without losing themselves. She trained apprentices from the slums, taught widows how to run stalls, and offered free treatments to war widows and the elderly. People called her the Mirror Witch. She didn't mind. A mirror, after all, reflected truth. And that was what she had always given them. As the months turned to years, the name Helvira faded. In its place, Madame Lana became legend. Her shop turned into a school, her school into a guild. And through it all, Kellen remained by her side, not as a protector, not as a savior, but as a partner. They never married. They didn't need to. Their bond was stronger than ceremony. It was etched in the way he polished her tools before every demonstration, in the way she kept space for his silence, in the ease with which they navigated life to survivors who had found not only healing, but home. And sometimes at night, when the world was quiet and her past life felt like a distant dream, Lana would sit beneath the stars and whisper to the girl she used to be, "We made it." With every passing season, Lana's reputation solidified. What had begun as survival became legacy. Her apothecary school, Hebretha Glint House, trained dozens of apprentices, most of them young women who had once been overlooked, underestimated, or tossed aside. They called her Madame, but not out of fear or custom. It was reverence, gratitude. Yet power rarely rises without shadows. One of those shadows was Lady Marist Valen, an old rival of Helvira's, brilliant. Ruthless and beloved by the old blood, Marist had long believed herself the kingdom's standard of refinement. She had laughed the loudest when Helvira was shamed. Now, with Lana undoing every expectation of beauty, influence, and womanhood, Marist felt her own relevance shrinking. "She sells potions like a peasant and wears linen to court," Marist hissed to her circle one evening. "And somehow, they call her visionary." She wanted her gone, disgraced, forgotten, and so began the campaign. Whispered rumors that Lana's ingredients were cursed, that she used forbidden enchantments, that the women she treated were unknowingly bewitched. She bribed inspectors, sabotaged shipments of herbs, and paid vagrants to stage illnesses after using Lana's products. Lana, meanwhile, stayed quiet. Not because she was weak, but because she was watching, learning. "You should defend yourself," Kellen said one night as he rubbed his sore shoulder, freshly returned from a border mission. "She's poisoning everything you've built." Lana sat beside him, gently applying a salve to his bruises. "Not yet," she said. "Let her show everyone who she truly is first." Her patience paid off. Weeks later, one of Lana's apprentices, a shy girl named Arawu, was arrested after a noblewoman accused her of spreading corruptive beauty magic. The charges were absurd, but Lana knew what it really was: bait. They wanted a trial, a public stage. Lana, the so-called mirror witch, would be the spectacle. She accepted it. The courtroom was overflowing when Lana stepped inside, Ari at her side, her posture regal, unshaken. The prosecution laid their claims: unnatural transformations, manipulation of noblewomen, breach of traditional guild laws. And then Lana stood. "I don't sell illusions," she said, her voice calm but resonant. "I teach people how to care for themselves. I give them tools, not lies." "But you change them," one old guild master snapped. "No," Lana replied. "I help them see who they've been all along beneath the grime of fear, neglect, and shame." She turned to the crowd, noble and commoner alike. "Tell me, how many of you have been told you weren't enough unless you looked like someone else?" Silence. Then one hand rose, then another, and another. Even the Queen's own attendant, once riddled with facial scars, stood and said, "She gave me back my face and my pride." By the time the trial ended, the charges were dropped. Ari was cleared. And Lady Marist, furious at the displace, formed out with her pride bleeding. But it didn't end there. Marist, ever venomous, turned to darker strategies. Lana's herb supplies began to vanish mysteriously. Her school was vandalized. And one day, a fire nearly destroyed the back wing of the Glint house. That night, Lana stood in the ashes, smoke curling in the air, her face streaked with soot and sweat. Kellen stood beside her, blood still drying on his sleeve after dragging a panicked student from the flames. "You can't stay gentle forever," he said, voice low. "They won't stop." "Not gentle," Lana replied, deliberate. And for the first time in this new life, she allowed herself to remember her old one fully. The lights, the fashion shows, the sharp eyes and sharper tongues. She had survived that world once. She would survive this one too. But she wouldn't just survive. She would conquer. In the weeks following the fire, Lana rebuilt. She did not ask for donations. She did not plead. She simply reopened the Glint house using her own savings, salvaged what she could from the wreckage, and began again stone by stone, brush by brush. But her defiance had not gone unnoticed. 2 days after the reopening, an envoy arrived from the Queen's Council, bearing an invitation sealed in gold wax. Lana broke it open with trembling fingers. She was being invited to establish a formal guild of beauty and wellness. It's backed by the crown. It would be the first of its kind, and she, of course, would lead it. Kellen found her in her small workroom that night, staring at the letter. "You've gone quiet," he said, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. His tone was gentle but watchful. "I thought this was what I wanted," she said, voice soft. "Recognition, power, a real seat at the table." He stepped closer. But now it feels like a cage, like they'll use this title to control me, to parade me when convenient, muzzle me when it's not." Kellen nodded slowly, watching her hands twist the parchment. "Then make the cage yours," he said. "Forge it into armor. You don't have to play by their rules if you write your own." She looked up at him, and in that moment, she realized just how deeply she trusted him. He had never told her what to do. He had never tried to steer her path. He simply stood beside it, unshaken, even when the world wobbled. "Why are you still here?" she asked quietly. He blinked. "'Cause I want to be." "No," she pressed, setting the letter down. "You've been injured protecting me, disgraced for defending me. You've lost opportunities status. You're a knight, Kellen. You belong in court, not outside a beauty school's door." He stepped closer. "You think court ever made me feel like I belonged?" She said nothing. "I was a war orphan, raised in a barracks, taught to kill before I knew how to read. Every place I went, I was a tool, a weapon." His voice didn't waver, but it dropped to something quieter, something rougher. "But here, you treat me like a man. You see me? And that means more than any bloody title they ever pinned on my chest." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. He didn't reach for her. He never did without permission. But she stepped into him, pressed her forehead lightly to his chest, and he exhaled. Long and slow, like he'd been holding that breath for years. "I don't know what this future looks like," she murmured. "Then let's build it together," he said. The following week, Lana stood before the Queen and her council, flanked by Kellen on one side and Aria on the other. Her proposal for the guild was not a request, it was a manifesto. "I will not limit beauty to the wealthy," she said, her voice clear and calm. "This guild will train, empower, and uplift those who've been denied care, knowledge, and choice. We won't sell lies. We'll give tools. And no crown, no noble house. We'll decide who's worthy." It was bold. It was dangerous. But it worked. The Queen, ever sharp, nodded once. "Then let your work speak louder than your enemies." And so the Guild of the Mirror Rose was born. It operated independently, funded partially by the crown and partially through Lana's profits. Apprentices came from across the continent, young girls and boys hungry to learn more than what society allowed them. It became a hub of transformation, not just of appearance, but of self-worth. But Lady Marist had not vanished. She had retreated into silence. And silence, as Lana knew too well, was where the most dangerous things brewed. That winter, a royal wedding was announced. The Queen's nephew, next in line for the throne, was to be wed. Lana was invited to prepare the bride, and her apprentices would style the court ladies. It was the perfect opportunity, or the perfect trap. Kellen was the first to say it aloud. "Should strike there," he said, pacing Lana's office. "With the entire court present. With you in the spotlight." Lana nodded, then let her. "'Cause this time, I won't just survive her, I'll end her reign completely." The royal wedding was a spectacle. Silks from the east draped the walls of the palace. Musicians played in every corner, and nobles adorned in shimmering brocades paraded through golden halls like peacocks. It was tradition, power, wealth, and a chance to see and be seen. Lana stood at the edge of it all, her apprentices bustling around her, preparing the bride's entourage. She wore her signature attire, soft flowing garments in shades of dusk and rose, with delicate floral stitching that matched her guild's emblem, a mirror framed in thorns. But her eyes never stopped watching. Kellen stood nearby in formal armor, clean-shaven, composed, and intimidating. He was technically on duty, assigned to protect several high-ranking guests, but they both knew his true post was beside her. "Any sign of Marist?" she asked softly, brushing lavender oil into the bride's hair. Kellen's jaw tightened. "None. Yet. But she would come." Lana knew it. And just before the vows were to be exchanged, she did. Lady Marist entered the main hall like a storm disguised as a woman. Her gown was ice blue, embroidered with serpent motifs, and her smile was blade-sharp. At her side walked a figure Lana hadn't expected: Sir Theron Vale, Kellen's former commanding officer and longtime mentor. A man Kellen had once called brother. Lana's heart dropped. Kellen froze. She turned him. He muttered, voice clipped. "I don't know how, but he's not here for peace." The wedding went on, oblivious to the tension building beneath its gilded surface. Lana finished her work with steady hands, even as her mind raced. Then, during the feast, the Queen herself called Lana forward to be honored publicly for her service to the royal bride. It was the perfect moment, the perfect target. Lana stepped into the spotlight, heart pounding, when Marist rose from her seat in the crowd. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice velvet smooth, "surely we must consider what kind of witchcraft has been allowed into this palace." Gasps rippled. Marist strode forward, lifting a vial from her sleeve. This, she declared, was found in Madame Lana's private chambers. A poison that mimics youth, but damages the blood over time. I have witnesses, testimonies. She turned to the crowd with mock sorrow. You've all trusted her. We all have. But her rise was too fast, too unnatural. Perhaps because it was never hers to begin with. Lana said nothing. But Kellen stepped forward, sword half drawn. Be careful what you say next, Marist. Theron blocked him, expression unreadable. Stand down, old friend. You're not my friend, Kellen said coldly. The Queen raised a hand. Silence. Her eyes locked on Lana. Well, Lana stepped into the center of the court and took the vial from Marist's hand. Calmly, without flinching, she uncorked it and poured a few drops onto her skin. Then, without a word, she dabbed the same drops on a scrap of cloth and pressed it to her lips. No poison, she said. Only dried chrysanthemum and rosemary oil. Common anti-inflammatory serum. Used by over 20 of my students. Even your own maid, Lady Marist. More gasps. The Queen turned. Is this true? Marist paled. It's a trick. She's manipulating, but the Queen had heard enough. If she had anything to hide, she said coldly, she would have run. Lana bowed slightly. I never run. That's her habit. Marist's mask cracked just for a second. Then she hissed through her teeth. You won't last, peasant. You never belonged here. And Lana, with quiet, perfect grace, replied, That's what they said the first time I walked into a makeup studio with calloused hands and thrifted brushes. Yet here I am. The Queen dismissed Marist from court, not in fury but in cool public disgrace. No titles stripped, no land seized, just silenced, forgotten. The worst fate for a woman like her. Lana wasn't done. That night, in the palace garden, she found Kellen standing in the moonlight, staring at the stars with the weight of Theron's betrayal heavy in his eyes. She walked up beside him. He made his choice, she said. I just don't understand it, Kellen replied, voice hoarse. He raised me, trained me, used to say, we protect those who can't protect themselves. Lana touched his arm, and now he protects power instead. Kellen turned toward her, his voice dropped. Every time I think I've seen the worst of people, someone proves me wrong. Lana looked at him for a long moment. And yet, you still show up? That's what makes you different. They stood there for a while in silence. Then slowly, Kellen reached out and took her hand. Not like a soldier, not like a knight, just like a man, choosing her. And Lana, who had once believed beauty was her greatest weapon, realized something far more powerful had taken its place. Belonging. 1 year later, the capital had changed. Where once women whispered beauty secrets in shame, now they wore their confidence openly painted in bold reds, lined in shimmering golds. Moisturized and radiant under the banners of the Mirror Rose Guild. Young girls no longer dreamed only of becoming noble wives. They dreamed of becoming artisans, healers, creators. They dreamed of becoming like Lana. And Lana herself? She stood beneath the flowering arbor outside the Glint house, now twice its original size. Watching her apprentices teach a group of wide-eyed children how to make herbal balms from lavender and sage, her body was strong now, still soft in places, still hers. She didn't chase perfection, she defined it. Inside, her name was being added to a book of royal advisors. The Queen herself had asked her to sit on the council not just as a beauty expert, but as a voice for innovation, healing, and reform. And Lana had accepted, on one condition, no powdered wigs, ever. And Kellen, he was at her side, as always, not as her guard, not as her shadow, but as her partner. He still wore armor, still trained squires, still scowled at suspicious nobles. But at night, when the world was quiet, he'd sit beside her on their garden bench, tea in hand, letting her rest her head on his shoulder. They never spoke grand words of love. They didn't need to. It was in the way he always brought her the first bloom of spring. It's the way she kept a space clear on her workbench, just for him to sit and watch. The way they faced the world together. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Kellen asked, Do you miss your old world? Lana smiled, brushing a curl from her face. Sometimes the speed, the lights, the convenience. Then she looked around, at the laughter of children, the scent of fresh flowers, the sound of her people thriving. But if I had to choose again, I'd still choose this. He took her hand. So would I. And as the wind carried the soft chime of laughter and bells, Lana leaned into his warmth, knowing that in this life, this unexpected, painful, beautiful life, she had found not just a second chance, she had found home. If you loved Lana's journey, her rise, her resilience, her romance, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. There's more where this came from, and every voice helps us tell the next beautiful story.